Hey everyone, Damien the Kung Fit Coach here. Something a little bit different for you today. Rather than the usual fitness advice, I've actually got some consumer advice for you instead. I get asked fairly often, what shoe should I be wearing? You might think that's pretty straightforward, right? Doesn't really matter maybe, but actually what shoes you wear can have a big impact on your workout, Kung Fu especially, but also just your general foot health, so it's an important thing to consider. So stick around, find out what I recommend, and for those of you that do Kung Fu especially, you might be a little bit surprised. So let's get into it, but remember, hit like, hit subscribe. Okay, first things first, let's address the elephant in the room, Feiyues. If you've done any Kung Fu training or you've looked into minimalist shoes at all, you're bound to have come across these. Pretty much everyone in China training wears them. They're plimp soles with squishy soles, they're nice and light, they're flexible, great for those low stances, great for absorbing the impact when you jump. If that's your only consideration, what's good for Kung Fu? Go buy those, they're fantastic, they're cheap, they'll probably last you 1 to 2 years unless you do a lot of outdoor training. Don't go for the kind of westernized fashion shoe, that will be a lot more expensive, but most places you can get them for about 15 to 20 pounds if you're looking for the martial arts shoe. Or you can get them for a couple of quid in China. So really good value. And there's lots of knockoff brands that are pretty much the same. The fit is sometimes a little bit different, but essentially it's the same product. Now I wore Feiyues for years because they are such a good shoe, but I've stopped. The reason for that is about 5 years ago, I transitioned over to wearing Barefoot shoes. Barefoot shoes, kind of a broad category, but usually broad toe box, so you've got room for your toes rather than having them squished in. They often have no drop from the heel to the toes as well, nice and flat, and they're generally got a thin sole as well. Now for me it was really the broad toe box that was the thing. I've got relatively wide feet, and you know, I was definitely noticing that my toes were getting more and more squished in normal shoes. After a little while of wearing those, would never go back to wearing normal shoes. They're so much more comfortable and just generally better for your feet. But on the downside, when it came to training Kung Fu, slipping into those Feiyues, they are quite narrow, and I found myself getting a lot of blisters. So I had to go looking for another option, something to replace my Feiyues. And you know, if that's not a consideration for you, if you don't have wide feet, if you're not interested in minimalist shoes or barefoot shoes, then go get some Feiyues. There's some links down below. Click on one of those, go buy them. It'll do you a world of good for your Kung Fu. But if you've got some other training considerations, or you are maybe interested in barefoot shoes, or you've got wide feet, then stick around and listen to my other suggestions. Alright, so my barefoot shoe journey started with these Vibram Fivefingers. They look a bit odd. You've got individual pockets for each toe. People do give you funny looks when they see you wearing these, but they're really, really comfortable. I can't stress enough how comfortable they are to wear. You will feel a little bit weird that they push your toes apart slightly to begin with. That's helping really, helps your toes adjust back to their more natural position rather than squished together. They've got a reasonably thick sole still, enough to protect your foot, enough to be able to walk around all day in these and not get sore feet. They're fantastic, I love them, they're great. The only downside to them is that you tend to get a little bit of water between the toes when it's wet out, which obviously happens a lot here in the UK, but very much my usual day-to-day shoe in the summer, and I used to wear them running a lot as well, even with that downside of the wet toes. So yeah, definitely recommend these as a general day-to-day shoe and as a training shoe. If you need a lot of grip, if you need to do weightlifting, if you're going for a run, they're really good. I don't recommend them for Kung Fu though, and that's because you've got these separate toes. I think there's the opportunity of injuring your toe potentially with these, but also because they're so grippy, it's quite difficult to change between stances and you can catch your toe more easily. So if Kung Fu is your big thing, unfortunately, these aren't what you want. I also, day to day, wear Vivo Barefoot shoes. Again, really comfortable, nice and broad. I really like them for a day-to-day shoe. They've got some great trainers as well that you can use for running. My wife uses their shoes when she goes for runs. I, again though, wouldn't recommend them for Kung Fu because they have really thin soles. There's generally not much padding at all, and when it comes to jumping, you need a little bit of a cushion, otherwise you've got that hard impact all the time. So I spent ages trying to find the right Vivo shoe, hoping that they'd release one, and they just didn't, so I had to keep looking. Trying to find a shoe that's broad, has a bit of a thick sole, and doesn't really have that drop, and is maybe a little bit flexible as well, is really, really hard. There's an awful lot of minimalist shoes out there that maybe don't live up to the name. So I spent a lot of time looking, a lot of time researching, and I ended up with two options. First option were these, Lems. They're relatively lightweight, but still fairly bulky when you compare them to something like a Feiyue, but they are pretty broad, as you can see, but most importantly, they've got quite a thick sole. It's not hugely squishy, but it's got a bit of a squish. It's maybe somewhere between a normal shoe and a Feiyue, I guess, and they're pretty flexible. So I thought, well, these might be a good shout. Let's give them a go, but I wasn't certain. When they arrived, I was quite happy with how supporting they were when it comes to jumps. They're a little bit grippy though, not quite perfect for Kung Fu, but definitely a good compromise. And if you do a lot of jumping, I would definitely recommend these. So these are Lems. I also went for another option as well, so I explored two shoes at the same time, and the others were these, Merrell Vapour Glove 3. These are also broad. They're a lot more minimal, as you can see, a bit more like Feiyue in the fact that they're really light and soft and very, very flexible. However, the sole on these is not that thick. Probably thicker than, say, a Vivo Barefoot shoe, but a little bit thin. Not as grippy, I don't think, as the Lems, but I was a little bit concerned about that thinness and how much support it would give me when I was jumping. But actually, I trained with these for a while and I found them to be more comfortable and kind of better for Kung Fu than the Lems were. It was just that jumping and also this hard bit at the end of the toe there. You do want to watch out if you're doing kicks onto your hands, like flick kicks. Don't hurt yourself on that. But you could see it's extra conditioning, you know. But actually, yeah, over time, I kind of got used to it. I got used to the level of support that these gave me in jumping, and my feet kind of just adapted. So it might be a little bit uncomfortable to begin with, but you will get used to it. So these are my probably preferred shoe, really, for Kung Fu. Bad news, it's getting harder and harder to get these. I think they've been discontinued. And now they've got the Vapour Glove 4. And if you take a look at them, they're similar, slightly different shape, slightly different construction to them. The sole is about the same. They're about as flexible as each other and about as light as each other as well. They've changed the grip, which is probably a bad thing, to be honest, for Kung Fu at least. They're definitely grippier, and I think they don't fit quite so snugly, but they're still a good shoe, and I would take these over, say, Lems or Vivos or Vibrams when it comes to training Kung Fu. So if you are looking for a barefoot Kung Fu training shoe, Merrell Vapour Glove 4s, definitely go out and buy them. If you can get Vapor 3s though, do that instead. But if you want a bit more sport, go for the Lems. If you don't care at all, you just want a Kung Fu shoe, go for the Feiyues or one of the knockoff brands. Day-to-day shoes, definitely Vibram Fivefingers. You'll get weird looks, but ignore other people. Doesn't matter how you look, it's how you feel and it's how your feet feel, how healthy your feet are, and I think they're definitely the best thing for that. But if you do want to look a bit more normal and still have healthy feet and barefoot shoes, those Vivo Barefoot shoes are probably the way to go. For general day-to-day training, these, or indeed these, are great for running. You don't have the problem of getting wet toes. As long as you don't step in some really big puddles, your feet will stay dry. And also, they do have a little bit of grip, so you could still do them, use them for things like weightlifting and stuff like that. So I think really the Merrells kind of almost hit it out of the park. Little bit more cushion would be good, but they're definitely by far the best barefoot training shoes I found. Last thing to comment on is the price. Obviously the Feiyues are dirt cheap. You can't really go wrong with those. Next, you've got the Merrells. They're full price around about £70, which is a bit much, but very often they're on sale for like 30-40 quid, which I think is a bargain really for what they are. You know, they're a high quality shoe, they're going to last. The rest of them are a fair bit more expensive again. The Vibram Fivefingers, the Lems, the Vivo Barefoots are all costing 70, 80, sometimes even over £100, depending on which one you buy. And it's a bit steep, I must say. You know, I wouldn't really want to spend that much on a shoe, but given what they are, given the options available, I am willing to do it because they're comfortable, they last, and they're good for my feet. But obviously, how much you can afford is up to you and how much you want to spend. So hopefully that's been some useful consumer advice for you. Links for all of these shoes are in the description below, so check them out. And if you do, let me know in the comments what you think of them, or if you've got any other suggestions on barefoot training shoes, whether that be running, general training, or indeed Kung Fu. Yeah, let me know. I'd love to see them. I'd love to maybe give some of them a go, see if I can find anything better even than my preferred Merrells. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give a good hard Marbu punch to that button, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.